Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first session of our virtual conference. My name is Judy Braus, and I'm the Executive Director of the North American Association for Environmental Education, and so happy that you could join us for the first session of our first virtual conference. We were really sad that we had to cancel in Puerto Rico. We were hoping we would all be together this week. But as you know, the hurricane had other plans, and we are really happy that instead that we could provide a few of the sessions that you would have heard in Puerto Rico with many of our colleagues. So thank you so much for joining today and for all your support during the past few weeks, not only for us at NAAEE, but mostly the support of Puerto Rico and all our partners down there. You all really helped lift our spirits throughout the whole entire last few weeks. So what we're going to do in session one is I'll do a little bit of an intro to Virtual Week. Then we're going to do a quick update on Puerto Rico, conference thank yous for all the work that went into the conference that never happened, unfortunately. And then we are so excited to have a panel of the Global Environmental Education Partnership. We have some amazing leaders from around the world here. We're going to talk about Tbilisi Plus 40, the call for action, and some of the exciting things that we're thinking about doing in the next decade. And we'll close with talking about how you can provide feedback on the call for action by going to actnowforee.org. And then we'll have a few closing words. So thanks for joining, and let me just start with a few words about the virtual conference. So as you probably know, if you're listening to this, some of the sessions are live streamed and some are on Zoom. So there are two ways to listen, and I'll tell you more about which is which. But we've got so many great people helping to put this together. If you have any technical issues, just write to Kristen or Cy, who are the masterminds of the technology, and they will help you if you can't get on or you can't get hooked up or whatever you need. And we also have some really amazing presenters this week who are going to be in Puerto Rico but have all stepped up to change their schedules and be here with us this week. So we're really excited about that. So today we have this session from 2 to 3:15. At 4 o'clock, we will hear highlights from the research symposium, and we have a great panel there moderated by Nicole Arduin. And then tomorrow, on Wednesday at noon Eastern Time, we have Creating and Supporting Culturally Relevant Organizational Change, and that will be on Zoom. And that's another great session with Rena. And then at 4 o'clock tomorrow, we have our panel on climate change, education, and hope, and that's another Zoom session. And on Thursday, we start at noon with a panel on how we can grow and support the movement, and we're going to hear from a panel of funders, including, we hope, one of our colleagues in Puerto Rico who has access now to a cell phone and the internet, and so we're really excited about that. And then our last session of the week is on Thursday at 3 o'clock, and this is another live stream event. And this is our EE 30 under 30 young leaders who are going to be at the conference. Instead, we brought them to DC, and they will be here. 4 of our top leaders will be here presenting, and we're really excited about that. So remember that Thursday is another live stream event on Facebook Live. So I have to just thank Rob and Kristen and Cy and Mary, who have just really stepped up to make the technology work for this week. And I also want to thank Bill Finnegan, who I'll thank in a minute when we see a video that we were producing. If anything goes wrong, it's their fault. Just kidding. That we couldn't have done what we're doing without them. I also want to let you know that if you were going to present at the conference, there's a way for you to upload your materials so that we can have a virtual record of what happened at the conference. People can search for your presentations, and we already loaded them all up on EE Pro, so you just need to go to the virtual conference, click on it, goes to your profile, and then you'll see the session. You click on it, and you add whatever you'd like to add. If you have any questions, just let us know. And it's a way for us really to have a collection of what happened, and then people can search for you and find out what you were going to do and then get in touch with you. So we're really excited about that. You also can download the programs for the research symposium so you can see what was going to happen, and also the regular conference. So you can just go to the conference site on NAAE.org and download a PDF of the conference and search for that. So NAAEE is 46 years old. We're getting old. It's the first time in 46 years we ever had to cancel a conference. So I just want to say that You guys have been so fantastic in raising funds to support our partners. Para la Naturaleza has been with us every step of the way. They've helped us plan the whole conference. It's an amazing organization working on conservation and education. And I'm going to turn it over to our Deputy Director, Christiana Martens, who did so much to make the conference almost come alive and has been helping us all week. So Christiana.
Hi, everybody. My name is Christiana Mertens with NAAEE, and I would just like to take a moment to thank you all so much for your support. To date, we have raised over $20,000 from almost 200 donors. 100% of these funds are going to go to Para la Naturaleza, who are our partners on the ground and who have been our partners from the very beginning. They are an amazing organization who are doing so much work to support community members directly and are truly the first responders. The island has been devastated. There is no question about that. They are nowhere near being okay, and they have years of recovery ahead. People's lives are still at stake, and the stakes are very, very real. Most of the island is still without power, and it is uncertain when they actually will regain their power. Some say it could be another year for some areas of the island, which is pretty phenomenal. So, for those of you who have been to Puerto Rico, you know that it is a majestic gem of an island. Its natural resources are unbelievable. Unfortunately, since Hurricane Maria, it looks like the island has been set on fire, and it is brown. And that is from our friend Terrell Santos, our co-chair from Para la Naturaleza. So, to understand where our funds are going and to give us an update on what's happening in Puerto Rico, Fernando Lloveras is the president of PLN, and we're going to share a video with you from him to talk a little bit about what exactly they're doing.
Greetings from Puerto Rico. I am Fernando Lloveras, president para la Naturaleza. Our organization was ready and excited to welcome you all to Puerto Rico this week for the North American Association of Environmental Education Conference. Our team, led by Elizabeth Padilla and Terrell Santos, together with all the staff of the conference, had really put together a remarkable agenda. Unfortunately, nature had other plans for us. On September 20th, our island was hit by one of the most ferocious hurricanes in its history. This natural phenomenon affected all aspects of our collective existence, and more than 20 days after its passing, all of us in Puerto Rico are still in the process of regaining some level of normalcy. The loss has been enormous everywhere, and thousands of communities continue to face dire conditions. I feel relieved to report that Para Naturaleza staff are safe and receiving our full support for recovery. Damage to our more than 50 nature reserves has been considerable, and while all of our historic structures survived, forests were hard hit, and we expect a long rebuilding process. Many neighboring communities to our natural protected areas are in urgent need of help. In response to this, we recently created Para Naturaleza Community Fund with three main objectives. First, to offer immediate assistance to these nearby communities. Second, to provide assistance to sustainable farmers. And third, to jumpstart the process of a massive reforestation program throughout the island. Our teams are active in the field, helping cleaning up roads, debris, and assessing the various needs of communities. Our visitor centers, located around the islands, are becoming hubs to channel crucial resources to our neighbors, such as water, food, and hygiene products. I want to especially thank the generosity of the National North America Association of Environmental Education that has already contributed over $13,000 to our efforts. We thank you very much for that. This week alone, we have distributed over 350,000 pounds of drinking water and are collaborating with other local NGOs to expand our reach in the coming weeks. Our commitment to our communities is long-term. First and foremost, we wish to aid them in their stabilization, but beyond that, our objective is to help them become stronger and more sustainable neighborhoods. For more than 47 years, Para Naturaleza's mission has been to protect and restore the ecosystems of our islands. We have embraced environmental education as one of our most important strategies in order to inspire volunteers and communities to take action in favor of nature conservation. In the wake of these emergencies, we will continue to live up to those ideals. Thank you again for your solidarity and support, and please do share our website paranaturaleza.org with your friends. Every donation now, no matter how small, will directly help in the recovery of our people and our ecosystem. Even after these extreme circumstances that we have been experiencing in Puerto Rico, there are great learning lessons. Hurricanes are a force of nature that directly tests the resiliency of all species. We are developing right now new educational programs directed to kids so they can understand positive and negative impacts of these phenomena, and we do hope that we could share this knowledge with all of your members in the next year conference. I invite and encourage you to participate and take advantage of the virtual offerings of the North American Association of Environmental Education Conference, and hope that we can have you back in Puerto Rico, but of course in non-hurricane season. Thank you very much.
PLN is in an amazing position to provide resources and the human power that it needs to distribute supplies immediately to local communities all over the island. They have 50 sites in the metropolitan areas to the most rural parts of the island, and they're able to access these places and provide the most important supplies. And right now, many of you have asked, how can you help in addition to providing funds? Well, supply donations are huge. Water, water filters, battery fans, double D batteries, hygiene kits, roof tarps, canned foods, products for babies. No clothes and no perishable foods at all are required, and we will provide all the information online because Para la Naturaleza has a distribution system set up on the island where they can access these folks immediately. So please, please continue to help. This island does have a long road ahead of it. We are so grateful to all of you, and we will also keep you updated on opportunities to volunteer in the future, probably next year. And thank you, thank you, thank you again for your support. And we hope you enjoy the virtual conference.
Thanks, Christiana. And I just want to also add my thanks that we had so many donors, everyone contributing very small amounts, some people contributing really large amounts. Whatever you could do really makes a difference. And we will be selling the mugs and T-shirts that we did put together for the conference, and they're beautiful. This is the mug design, and you'll see the mugs later with our panel because they're all drinking out of the mugs, and it was designed by Sylvia Weir, who's an amazing designer. And then we also will be selling the T-shirts that we would have sold for the conference. So all the donations will go to the Together for Puerto Rico Fund that will support Para la Naturaleza. So I want to thank a lot of the people who helped make the conference almost happen. And we will be thanking them in person at our conference next year, but I wanted to do a quick thank you now to all the sponsors who stepped up and really wanted to support our work in Puerto Rico. And we're really, really thankful for their support of environmental education and their support of NAAEE. And many of our colleagues have also donated to the Together for Puerto Rico Fund, and we're really excited about that, along with many of our board members and our advisory council members. We also had more than 220 volunteers signed up to help. Some people had already helped by reviewing sessions. So it's a really huge family affair of getting a lot of volunteers to help put on the kinds of conferences that we do that have been so valuable to everybody that attends. And I also have to thank the NAAEE team, who has been absolutely amazing. I couldn't work with a better group of people. I am just so honored to be part of this team. And all our supporters, like Rob Stewart, who's sitting here right now in this studio, trying to direct traffic in this studio. He's amazing, does all our technology support. Alicia, who many of you have talked to, who was helping with all the issues leading up to the conference. And then when we had to cancel all the hotel issues, as you can imagine, all the catering, all of those issues. Canceling a conference and unraveling it is actually harder than putting the conference on, just so y'all know. So, and Bill Finnegan, as I mentioned, has been so helpful in creating EE Pro, being our videographer for NAAEE in the field. And not only does he know all the technology code, he also knows the field of environmental ed. We're just so lucky to have Bill on board. And I want to thank our board. The board has been terrific and really has stepped up to support all the staff and everyone during this tough last few weeks. And our NAAEE Advisory Council, who we go to all the time for advice and feedback and support. They have all been terrific. And you'll get to hear Danny Washington on Thursday, who is facilitating the 30 Under 30 panel that will be live streamed. I also want to thank Nicole Ardwin and Alan Reid, and you'll get to hear from Alan in just a minute. He's going to be facilitating our panel. They were the co-chairs of the Research Symposium, and those of you who have participated in the Research Symposium know what an amazing event it is. There's so many great sessions and, almost 200 researchers from around the world sharing what we're learning about this field, which is always so helpful. And a big thank you to all of our affiliates who, again, have also been so supportive, spread the messages, gotten the information out about Together for Puerto Rico, as well as information on how to cancel flights and all the information that people needed to deal with the cancellation. One of the sad parts also of the conference is we won't get to congratulate our award winners in person, but we are going to congratulate them now, and they're also on the website. So I encourage all of you to take a look at these amazing individuals and organizations that have done so much to move the field forward. And I encourage you to go to the award site on the conference. We've also posted these on Facebook, and thank all the people who really have done an extraordinary job in environmental education in all aspects. And then usually at the conference we talk about NAAEE highlights. What I'm going to say today is that we are doing a lot of really cool stuff. So I encourage you to go to our website and check out things like EE360, which is our partnership with US EPA and Ginger Potter, and the work that we're doing with so many wonderful partners, our eSTEM work with UL, all the civic engagement and democracy work that we're doing with Kettering and Oberlin, the Natural Start and the work we're doing to really engage early childhood educators and to make sure everyone has access to nature and environmental education from the earliest days. Our work with Cal Water and water conservation, a new podcast coming soon, and the Global Environmental Education Partnership, which I'll talk about in a minute, and some of the work we're doing to link research and practice in EE Works and many other things. So we've got a lot of stuff going on. We're working with so many of you on all of this, and I encourage you to go to NAAEE.org, check out EE Pro, and also check out our 2016 annual report to find out more about what the organization does if you're not familiar with what we do. I also really want to encourage you to come to Spokane next year. It's a beautiful city in Washington, and as you heard from our partners in Puerto Rico, they will be there as well, and we will hear more about what happened in Puerto Rico. It's going to be a beautiful event, and it's going to be in a perfect time of year in October, and I don't think there are going to be any hurricanes, so that is good. And now I want to shift gears just a little bit to talk about the conference theme that was going to focus on Tbilisi Plus 40, and the other part of the theme was Imagine a World. So we wanted to look back and think, what have we accomplished in the last 40 years as a field? And then we wanted to imagine, what do we want to do in the next decade and beyond to really make a difference and have an impact? And so I'm so excited that we have a panel here that's going to talk a little bit more about what we can do to shape the future of the environmental education field and talk a little bit about the Global Environmental Education Partnership. This is a partnership with EPA Taiwan, US EPA, the International Environmental Partnership, and the North American Association for Environmental Education, and so many people from around the world. It is truly a partnership program, and it's a learning network, and so all of us are sharing, and we're trying to figure out how we can help build capacity around the world. Our mission is to create this vibrant network that allows anyone to join in and learn what's happening in other countries and how all of us can work to create a more sustainable future using the power of environmental education. So there are 3 goals to the GEEP, And some of you know this very well because you've been on the website. You can go to the GEEP.org. But building capacity to advance global policy and practice as environmental education is one of the key goals. Many countries have national policies, but not all, of course, maybe 8 to 10, I think. And we're looking at how can we build more policies that will strengthen environmental education? How can we improve practice? Second big goal is all-around partnerships. This is the key to GEEP. We are trying to be a network for networks. How can we help facilitate learning across networks within networks? And it would result in a stronger global environmental ed community. And finally, the last goal is really talking about innovation and thinking about how we can create a global EE think tank and really think outside the box and do really cool stuff. So the call for action came from this GEEP, this group of global leaders. We have an international advisory group of leaders from around the world talking about how do we celebrate Tbilisi Plus 40 and also talk about what we should do as we think ahead to the future. What are our priorities for environmental education in the next decade? And when we're standing here and it's Tbilisi Plus 50, what do we think we should have accomplished? What do we want to accomplish? And beyond as we're thinking about the future. So we developed this call for action. It has 10 actions, and I'll tell you more about the website, actnowforee.org. And I want to show you a little video that introduces the call for action and tells you a little bit more about it.
Imagine a world where everyone has the opportunity to experience nature. A world where every learner, young and old, has access to the best environmental education possible in schools, in their community, at work, and throughout life. Where educators everywhere are empowered to teach people not what to think, but how to think. A world where science informs our decisions and policies. Where everyone participates in civic and community life, recognizing the connections between social justice, fulfilling jobs, livable cities, and environmental sustainability. And where the health and diversity of our planet and our communities are viewed as inseparable. But how do we achieve this vision? Here's the good news. Research shows that environmental education works. And our charge as educators is to make sure everyone, everywhere has access to high-quality environmental education. We need to build on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and more effectively link environmental protection with social justice and shared prosperity. We need to reorient our educational systems towards people and planet. And as educators, we need to take actions that push us out of our comfort zones. The Global Environmental Education Partnership, a learning network of environmental educators from around the world, is proposing an ambitious call for action to align and elevate our work. This call for action asks all of us in the international environmental education community to take stock of where we are as a field, to think ahead to the future, and to be bold. Visit actnowforee.org to help craft an action plan for the next decade of environmental education. As educators, we have the ability to shape the future. We are the voice for environmental education. Together, we are an unstoppable force.
So you will be able to access that video and use it however you'd like to use it to be able to get people to come to the website and weigh in on these 10 actions, which, again, were a collaborative process to figure out what do we want to do in the next decade? What are our priorities? And under these bigger umbrellas, what are the actual actions that we want to take at actnowforee.org? So now I am so excited to turn this over to Dr. Alan Reid, who is a member of the GEEP Advisory Group, who will be facilitating a panel with the most amazing colleagues I have ever worked with. And you'll get a chance to find out more about the GEEP, and you'll get a chance to find out more about Tbilisi Plus 40 and their thinking about the call for action and how all this came about. So, Alan, welcome.
Thank you, Judy. And again, just on behalf of the panel, thank you for your dedication to the field and the leadership that you've shown with bringing this virtual conference together and the opportunity and the energy that you bring through the GEEP. It's a really exciting time to be working in environmental education, both nationally and internationally, and with the Global Environmental Education Partnership and the Call for Action, a chance to see things really take off in this field. The panel that we have with us today is drawn from different parts of the global environmental education community. Everybody involved here is part of the GEEP 2, and they represent national organisations, local organisations, international perspectives, research organisations, government organisations, and much more, because we all wear multiple hats, of course. I'm really pleased to welcome Tim, Margie, Arjen, Kartikeya, MJ and Ginger to the panel today. And what we're going to be focusing on in the next half an hour or so is hearing about how you in your organisations and networks are taking on different aspects of the call for action and the kinds of things you see as the priorities, the ways that you're involved in strengthening the environmental education community internationally, and also the kind of hopes for the future, going back to the point that we heard before from Judy about what Tbilisi Plus 50 might look like. We also are really pleased to be able to have this being streamed, and we can respond to some questions from our audience wherever you are, so that you can participate in the discussion too. So to get us going, I'd just like to remind us of some of the things which were flagged in the video. The Global Environmental Education Partnership has this ambitious call for action. It's designed to align and elevate the work of environmental education and environmental educators around the world. And it's asking the international community to take stock of where we are as a field, to think ahead to the future, and to be bold. Some of the things which interest me, and I'm sure our audience will be interested in finding out a bit more about, is the kind of work which is going on in different countries around the world. And one of the things I'd like to really hear about, first of all in our discussion, is the kinds of priorities different people have in their contexts. So, Tim, could you tell me which of those 10 actions most resonated with you, and what you see as a priority, for example, within the Taiwanese situation?
Okay, thank you, Alan. Within these 10 actions, the priority, to my opinion, over the next decades is building a bigger, inclusive, more inclusive field, which means to ensure that the people of all races, ethnicities, sexual preferences, gender abilities, and socio-economic backgrounds have access to high-quality environmental education and are leading the movement to create a more sustainable future. In terms of high-quality environmental education, it has been shaped by a variety of sectors in Taiwan for about 30 years. Until a recent year in 2010, Taiwan launched Environmental Education Act that requires Taiwan citizens, including all governments, officials, school students, staff, and teachers, and even violators of environmental law and regulations, to participate in environmental programs for at least 4 hours each year. These requirements covered about 25% of Taiwan current population. Because of the Environmental Education Act and its guidance, it drives NGOs, institutes, and schools to change the traditional, or we call loose ways of designing and planning environmental programs into so-called beta programs in order to attract people to buy their products. One of the projects that I have been working on is to help Taiwan Forestry Bureau operate 2 nature centers in Taiwan. And since 10 years ago, most Taiwanese did not think it's worth of paying money to participate in environmental education program. Today, people become more willing to pay for environmental education program. In this situation, we can see that the institution and social marketing indeed promote better environmental education program and induce more people to create greening industry of environmental education. And hopefully, in the future, we can support green career economy.
Thank you, Tim. To me, that's a really good example of how a national level policy initiative has led to a lot more uptake and participation in environmental education. And I think many people will be surprised that if you're an environmental offender, you get mandated with having to enrol in a class. And perhaps that is thinking outside the box. Perhaps that's an innovation for some people. Again, I'm reminded in this that on the GEEP website there are country profiles, and to find out more about what's going on in Taiwan, we can have a look there. And there are also case studies on the website which illustrate different ways of trying to strengthen the field, trying to promote change, trying to make it a more inclusive and diverse field. So again, thank you for the example you've just given us there, Tim, and I'm sure there might be some questions which we can discuss later in relation to that. Margie, you're working in a slightly different context, and the kind of priority that you would want to focus on is probably different from the kinds of things that Tim's emphasised. What's your priority for the next 10 years?
Well, in terms of the 10 actions for the future, in this call to action in Sisyana and Mexico City, we focused on the 9th one, which was strengthening the environmental education role in achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We think that those 17 goals are probably formulated by the best thinkers, the biggest thinkers in the world. There's a huge consensus. And so by focusing on these goals in developing our own strategic plan for the next 5 years, it gave us, it strengthened our own strategic planning. It gave us a blueprint for action. It let us know what the best practices were, what the most important areas of work would be, and it allowed us to compare ourselves to other groups and align ourselves with what's really important in the world, which also helps position us as an organization. We're an NGO, we're a nonprofit. It helps us get projects. It helps us do what's really important. And the way we did this was twofold. We actually took our own strategic planning goals, the main goals and the sub goals, and we aligned them and did like a study and said which of those goals are related to which of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and we could see what goals we covered, where we were strong, where we were weak. We also analyzed from an activity point of view each thing that we do and said, oh, you know, this activity supports this goal, that goal, the other goal. And it just, it's a cross-reference for us. It helps us plan our activities. And I think in the future we know where we need to strengthen ourselves. So I think it was, this call to action really spoke to us in many of the objectives, but this one really guided our work this year. So I think it's really useful for whoever's reading this to take these Sustainable Development Goals to heart and use them in their own organization.
Great, thank you, Margie. And I think with that, again, that emphasis, say, in action number 6 on connecting and collaborating for change, you being willing to share the kind of process you went through for those organisations who are kind of figuring what should we be doing in the next few years? Is it time to kind of reorient ourselves as well? Are there different ways of connecting with some of the other priorities or learning from best practice around the world? That's, to me, a very good example of an opportunity for people who join the partnership to add to that as well as learn from that.
Great starting point.
Exactly. Arjen, again, there are different types of priorities depending on your organisational background, your experience in the field. I'd just like to, again, ask that question to you, what you see as a priority for the next 10 years.
Well, thank you, Alan. I think it's, first, it's very difficult to choose one.
Yes.
No, I think we need to create some synergies between them, and that the whole needs to be more than the sum of its parts. That's a good principle in environmental education. But if I were to choose one that I think will be important in the coming years, is that we I think, become more reflective and more reflexive in what we do, so that we also not try things out and innovate, but we also think on about what works and how do we know that it works, so that we look for data and evidence and that we can make more plausible that what we do is really matters. This will also help organizations fund our work, I think, and it will give confidence to governments to create policies that can support our everyday environmental education practices. If I look at the countries where I work most, which is the Netherlands and Sweden, as an example, we work closely with schools that want to develop this, what we call whole school approach, where they build partnerships with the local community, with local businesses, try to make the curriculum more responsive to local issues, where they try to create some space, and they have to be bold, as the video showed. You know, we need to be bold sometimes to break away from the routines that make us live in an unsustainable way. In some ways, schools are having to create these spaces and these niches that can make a more local curriculum, that can where they can bridge and bond between different community organizations, where we can not just look at food, water, energy, but look at the whole nexus of food, energy, water, biodiversity, and that boundary crossing and the boundary crossing competence and brokering and networking relationships, that will become core capacity for environmental education and for sustainability education in the future. So more informed, researched, not just as outside academics researching these practices, but working with the local community in co-investigating what is working, where actually also pupils, students, and people working in schools in a way research their own practices. And I think that's another way of bonding, connecting science and society, using environmental education as a bridge. So this is where I think we can be heading in the future.
Okay. Arjen, again, I think that point you made earlier about the synergies between them, to me, if I just had a checklist, I'd say, oh, that was 3, 4, and 5. That's about looking at about creating and empowering global citizens, there's building global leadership, and again, the connections which we have across countries can be really important. But there's also that investing in research and evaluation to improve practice. Again, in the video, we saw the very quick image of environmental education works, but that reminder that if you follow the hashtag EE works, you can see some of the evidence which supports that. And again, to recognise that we don't have all the answers, we need to keep researching and investing in new questions and new solutions for new times, recognising that what the field was like, say, 40 years ago isn't what it is now. And we use language that we didn't even think existed back then, the circular economy. Talk about sustainability was framed in a very different way then. So that kind of being able to share across networks and find out how other people discuss this, develop policies and responses to that is a really important part of that. Thank you to our first three panellists. I'd now like to kind of shift the focus to that kind of emphasis within the discussion earlier about taking stock and looking back from where we're coming. I think, Kartikeya, you have a really interesting example of how a long-term vision is really important for the kind of strategic work which can be achieved. And the kind of sense of scale which comes out of kind of planning for the long term. So by to police plus 50, for example, it will probably look very different in India, but also within the region because of the kind of work you have seen emerging there. So can you just tell us a bit about the work which has been going on in India?
The Center for Environment Education, CEE, was set up in '84 it was the same year in which the Ministry of Environment was being set up. And at that time, many of us argued that you really can't have an environment policy which is based on technology and changing laws and things, but you need people to understand it. And ultimately, it's to do with lifestyles. And so unless you really have environmental education as the foundation almost, it won't happen. And it needs to happen outside the government sector in some ways, but in partnership. So we were set up as a center of excellence of the ministry, working closely with education and environment. And as we were sort of growing, we were influencing people. A very important thing happened in India in 91, which was that the Supreme Court said that every course, every formal education program in India, in schools and in colleges, had to have environmental education in it. And this was a challenge thrown out because there was no such books available, teachers were not ready, and we were right there to take up that challenge. But I must say that in those early years, I and my colleagues coming to NAAEE and seeing what some of the exciting work which was happening here, and in a sense almost bringing some of the people. We had Bill Stapp come in and discuss how water quality could be monitored. We had Judy talking about NatureScope as a guide which took teachers and this. We had Cheryl Charles bringing in Project Wild and many others. And I think it was very important. Those are the early days of why that international collaboration is so critical, and which we see now in GEEP happening. In India, we work with 15 languages. We work with so many different cultural areas. We work with people working on coastal areas, people working in some of the highest mountains. We have heavy rainforest areas. We have deserts. So you need to think of education and materials we produce as a tool in the hands of the teacher. It's not a prescription. And every classroom has a different thing. So how do you produce tools which are strong and which vary in this way? We also needed to go out to large campaigns. For instance, we are just doing a climate change campaign, which is exhibits mounted on a train. And this train goes all around, and something like 2 million visitors see it every year. And we've just been doing research to find out that even 6 months after they visited the train, they still recall many of the key concepts and exhibits. So we need to look at environmental education as very much mainstreaming it in that large scale, and people not thinking of environment as negative to development. And in this, when we were talking about the footprint as something which you can't help, but you can reduce it, but some children in 10-year-olds in Hyderabad came up with this concept of a handprint as representing positive action. And that really became an important symbol for us. And at Tbilisi Plus 30, which we did in Ahmedabad, official UNESCO conference, that's when we launched it. And it's a concept which is available throughout the planet. We hope many of the people who are looking at this will also use it. It's a very powerful concept of showing that environmental education leads to positive action and leads to development. It doesn't curtail development. Good climate change work will in fact be more sustainable and better for development than not. But therefore, the challenges of keeping this positivity, getting people to connect, the whole school approach, which Arjen talked about, people connecting to the community and taking it forward, and finally becoming citizens who will have a lifestyle which is developed but not wasteful. And that's the challenge. It doesn't exist. You cannot imitate something, but we want a new developed concept. So that's what we are doing.
Thank you, Kartikeya. I think, again, one of my instant reactions to that is it's so useful to hear about the different strategies that people have tried over time. Learn from failures, learn from things which don't work in my context. You can't import this idea here. But also the kinds of things which you can offer to others to say, well, here's a template, here's a powerful idea, here's a model or a stimulus which might get you thinking, well, what's the equivalent of the footprint or the handprint for you? What would be more appropriate to your context? And I think, again, that kind of the networking of networks together so that we can share ideas, we can learn from each other, learn from our mistakes, talk about them in our case studies, think about where we need to be over the next 10 years, is a really powerful aspect of taking on different aspects of the call for action. If we can now move on to MJ. MJ, you're working from a very different space, a very large space too as well. I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit more about how strengthening the environmental education community in the Southern African context is going ahead, and what you draw on from the call for action for that, but also linking it into some other ideas and priorities and drivers of change in that region for the environmental education community.
Right, thank you, Alan, and those who are watching and listening. In Southern Africa, we have Environmental Education Association of Environmental Education. We have been existing, or my organization has been existing for the past 35 years. We have been involved in workshops, conferences, and we are also engaged in disseminating information through our accredited journal, as well as the bi-monthly bulletin. In the bi-monthly bulletin, that is where we capture our success stories, what other people may call case studies. We have actually moved from one country to another country carrying out the activities. My organization has also influenced policy and practice within the region. Most of the countries today, they have fully fledged programs. They have a number of projects that actually were supported by this association. Some people within the region have also benefited through scholarships that were organized by my organization, particularly for masters and PhDs in the region. So I see my organization as a strategic partner as far as global environmental education partnership is concerned, because we can support and strengthen each other's strengths in the areas that I have actually mentioned. I also see my organization and partnering with GEEP as a contribution to environmental and sustainability education discourse in the world. I also see it as also a link and contributing directly and indirectly to other global discourses. I'm also thinking of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, particularly number 4, quality education. I think we can enhance or both enhance quality education through our activities. I also see another development also linked into UNESCO Global Action Plan, particularly on different areas like on policy, curriculum development, capacity building, particularly for educators, youth development, community engagement. I think these areas can actually strengthen and put our both organizations on the world map. People will know more about us, will know about what we are doing. We may actually buy in the interest in our partnership. And then I also see direct kind of link between my organization and GEEP, particularly on area number 6 on connecting and collaborating for change, because this collaboration, all these activities can actually lead to change, which we are all striving for. I also see another link when it comes to expanding environmental education role in achieving conservation efforts globally. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, MJ. And that's a useful reminder that one of the things the GEEP has been using is the EE Pro platform. And there is a global environmental education group within there in case people want to get in contact with some of our panel members today, but also to explore some of the different possibilities and challenges and lessons learned. And again, the chance to listen and to think and reflect, but also to plan and strategize with others for developing and strengthening the field in the future. We're beginning to get questions coming in, and it's going to be difficult to squeeze them all in during the course of this panel. But I'd like to, again, shift the conversation on slightly to think about that kind of vision for the future, the horizons, the hopes that we might have for what the field might become or need to become in the next 10 years to really capitalise on the kind of stimulus that the call for action is creating. We heard in one of the recent GEEP meetings about the importance of weaving a network. We've heard about the importance of, I think to use some of the words you've just used in the last discussions, about building on the strengths of your own strengths. And again, drawing on when you're feeling weak, the role of solidarity we heard from the video earlier on, but that kind of, sometimes we just need support and a culture of hopefulness about where this is going. So just to begin to end our first round of kind of discussion, I'd like to ask Ginger, what are your hopes for the next 10 years? What are you wanting to see happen in relation to things like the call for action?
Thanks, Alan. I have some very strong ideas about where I'd like us to be 10 years from now, but let me step back for a second and say, when Judy told us that the conference this year was going to be Tbilisi, but plus 40, what does that mean to us as the GEEP? What does it mean to the environmental education field? And the GEEP came up with this list called a call to action. It's in draft form. But when you go through that list, you can see yourself as an individual. You can see yourself as part of an organization, as a country. It's about being a champion for EE. I can do that as an individual. I can do that from my organization. Partnering, I can partner with a university. I can partner with an agency in another country. And the power of the call for action is that every environmental educator should be able to see themselves somewhere in that call for action and be able to say, I can do at least one of those things. So when I think about it as a very positive action that we have taken as the GEEP, if I look to 10 years from now, I have two very strong opinions about where I would like us to see us be in 10 years. The first is I would like to stop having the conversation about its environment or its economics. We know as environmental educators it's both of those things, and throw in social issues too, and then you have that holistic approach to thinking. I don't want to have to talk to people and say, no, it isn't one or the other, it's all of it. We need to think differently. In 10 years, I also want to be able to say, and that's probably because from where I sit in the Environmental Protection Agency, I want to see the measurable results of our work in terms of measurable results in the environment. Has our work led to an improved environment at the local level, community level, all the way to the global level? So thinking about water in a specific community, all the way to what are we doing with climate change, which is affecting the entire population of the world.
Thank you, Ginger. So one of the key things that raises is that the assumption that people are hopeful about the future. And one of the questions which has come in is just to check, do all of the panel members have hope for the future, or are they overwhelmed by the depressing news that we hear day in, day out? We're bathed in that. But
can we be both?
I think some of this is that kind of critical, radical hope where we're cautious about not sounding too idealistic, but things like the call for action hopefully get us out of being despondent or being too bogged down in old ways. And again, the power of collaboration, the power of networking can often be to say, well, which direction do we need to go in? And perhaps the kinds of things that you've mentioned there. I, for one, would add, I would hope that also the quality of environmental education is better in terms of educational terms, as well as the conservation outcomes. But on that, I'd love to hear from other panel members about what they see as their hopes for the future.
Why would we bring in hope? Because it's something we can do things. We don't have to just hope. We are going to act so that it becomes positive. So it's in our hands, and that's the handprint idea, that we can make it positive. We don't just hope for positive, but we make it positive. And I think there are lots of indications around the world. And I think what Ginger said is critical, that I think we have to make people understand that environment and sustainability and these ideas are in fact economic and social ideas as well. This is not this or that. I mean, it can only work if it's together. And I think that is something which we hope Tbilisi plus 50 people would have understood, that it is ultimately to do with that, and then of course to do with one's lifestyles.
I think maybe in early environmental education there was a lot of emphasis on knowledge and awareness and understanding, which led to people recognizing that we were in trouble, so to speak, as a human species, and with it all other species. And we did not pay a lot of attention to this creating these environments that invite us to act and to bring about change. And if you only stop with understanding and awareness, then it can lead easily to despair and a feeling of powerlessness and apathy even, and people withdrawing. So I think and this is what's so powerful about the GEEP, I think, is that we network these positive actions, but also these principles, these design principles, that we can use to design learning spaces that invite action, that build capacity for change, and that these niches where people are trying to really make a difference in their schools and communities are being networked so that they can become regimes, and then eventually the whole landscape will shift, and there will be tipping points from sustainability made difficult to sustainability made easy. And then things could accelerate in another direction. So I'm quite hopeful in that sense.
I think on that, Arjen, one of the things, again, talk of design principles is really important. We've heard about the importance of mindsets, but also shifting the kind of mindscape around this, how we collectively and individually engage with some of these ideas and how we design our way towards a better future is one of the challenges which the UN has raised, the CEE has raised, that different organisations around the world have taken on in different ways. And that point again about the power of a network to share those ideas, test them, refine them, again is part of the design principle aspect. Some of the other questions which are coming in are some very simple questions to answer, and I'd love to hear your views on this. One of them is, besides filling out the survey, what else can I do related to the call for action? Another is, if you're feeling that you're in an organisation or a network which is fairly resource-strapped, what kinds of ways of engagement, what kind of participation could you have in the GEEP? Margie?
I think, well, what can you do? I mean, I think there's a self-selection in people in our field, in the sense that if we weren't optimistic and hopeful, we wouldn't be killing ourselves and working, trying to get money. But I think any action that goes in a positive direction is positive, and if we want to get to a better place, I think what we do will be the sum of all the actions of all the people moving in a direction, and things that may appear now kind of out there will become mainstream. You know, that's what I think a lot of us are working for the way we react to our use of energy or use of materials, or et cetera, are moving in the right direction. So I think no action is too small if people want to know what they can do. If they want to do larger actions, they can network. They can. I mean, I think EE Pro and all the tools that NAAE offer will allow people to network with other people, find out what they're doing, see what someone else is maybe doing better than them, look for funding. I mean, I think we have to vote with our feet, as we were speaking this morning. You have to get up and move and do something if you want a positive change. So.
I also think it's about challenging ourselves as individuals. The first action is be a advocate for environmental education, and we can all say we're all advocates in some way. But maybe I want to look down to one of the other actions and say, all right, can I do something a little more than what I'm doing as an advocate? Can I start talking to people about environmental education? Can I start really reaching other partners who might not be in environmental education, but may have some theories and philosophies and attitudes that would help us as environmental educators? So I think it offers a challenge to people to think where you are and try and do a little bit more.
And I think just to go back to Margie's point there, if this is for you, then take action. And it goes back to Tim's point at the beginning. If we are to build a bigger, more inclusive field, then people need to be comfortable participating. So again, reaching out to each other, being inclusive, being welcoming is a key part of that. And I think a lot of people who are involved in the GEEP have that real feel of being welcomed, appreciated, challenged sometimes, but also this kind of, we're not here just to talk, we're here to act. And again, working out what those actions might be, from what some people see as a small step might be a big step for others, and vice versa, depending on the types of organisations we work in, the networks we have, how isolated we are, how connected we are, and so on. So I think that there's some key things there.
So just one thing that I find maybe critical, but we don't talk about it much, which we should maybe do more, is to point out some of the inconsistencies in the way we live ourselves and the hypocrisy sometimes that we are faced with. So asking difficult questions about how we live, how we travel, what we eat, and living by example, walking the talk. It will really increase the credibility of the field if we, as an organization or as an individual or as a family, try to kind of embody a more sustainable way of living. And I think Kartikeya's notion of the handprint and the footprint, and making an analysis about what is my footprint, how can I shrink it, and what is my handprint, how can I expand it, is a very good way to start.
But Gandhi here is a great inspiration for doing exactly that, which is to say that you are the message which you are giving, you live it. And it's extremely difficult because we are all full of contradictions. The plane ride I take will be a contradiction.
Absolutely.
So how much can we do it? But it is a movement in a certain direction that we are doing. And I find that the new connectivity which is there is fabulous for GEEP. But we must not in the process forget that we actually do need to also connect with nature. And I find that increasingly young children have really not had a direct experience. They know nature also through the television and not through actually spending a night out. And I think we must not forget that very fundamental part what environmental education always did, which was to connect people to nature.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a saying, think globally, act locally. I have heard about this saying when I was an undergraduate student. And so far, 30 years passed. And how do we think globally? And how do we act locally? So I think now still to go back to this, if we don't have a GEEP like this network, we have never have a chance to know how people think globally. So this is the very good chance, and then now we have to work on action. Yeah, and how can we have a 30-year experiences of doing environmental education in different countries, in different areas. Now we have a more case study, more ideas of how to help people, work locally. Yeah.
I think, Tim, on that, again, in the video we saw that kind of one of the founding principles of environmental education being about teaching people how to think, not what to think. Again, as organisations, it's not that we need to be told what to do and tell each other what you should really be doing, but that kind of, how can we think about improving what we're doing to champion the field, to build leadership in the field, to deliver on some of our commitments to conservation targets, to work more closely with the Sustainable Development Goals movement, and so on. There are a number of different things where stepping back and thinking and learning with others, that point about the GEEP being a vibrant learning community becomes really important to that. MJ, you have...
Yes, let me just sum up my response. Is just to the question is, it's high time we move from rhetoric to practical action. Environmental education itself, to me, it's a fairly new area. The call for action here, it's something that is very new, so we have to take advantage of it and show the world that environmental education is there to make a change, a positive change for that matter, not just change. And then we can do this by so many ways. One of them would be sharing experiences, particularly where we have made change within the community, where we have saved the resources, or where we have actually even rescued animals, where we have actually contributed to poverty eradication or reduction, and in many ways. Just sharing those would actually be a meaningful contribution. And the last one, if we just, that little contribution to the victims of the hurricane in Puerto Rico would make a huge difference, and that would be one way in which we can actually show that we are taking action.
Right, thank you, MJ. Now, one of the things that people often want to know through things like the case studies or the country profiles, or even at conferences and events, is how people learn how to deal with, say, some of the barriers they faced in countries like we couldn't get the legislation up. We don't have the chance to have a law like in Taiwan where all civil servants have to do environmental education, for example. In other places, we don't have a Supreme Court to do this. But that wasn't obvious that was going to be the way forward. So I just wondered, given one of the questions which we've had from our audience there, some of the barriers you've encountered in developing and strengthening environmental education in your country, in your network, in your organisation, etc. But how, perhaps moving on from just recognising the barrier to what you've done about those, to perhaps either overcome them or subvert them or to deflect them, or Margie?
I think my experience is we do all of the above. Because on the one hand, since I've been in this field in the past 22 years, the laws have changed, the educational standards have changed. In Mexico, the educational standards are federal, so the whole country uses the same materials, but they change over time. And depending on the political moment, which might be similar as in the United States, depending on the political moment, there's more strength, more credence, less credence given to that. And depending on what's in style, what are the buzzwords, you know, is it climate change, is it sustainability, you know, people's idea, which translate into dollars spent on donations, it changes. So we have, while we take all those things into account and kind of go with the flow, we need to be in some ways opportunistic and use what's available. But on the other hand, we have a core set of values that we don't change for anybody. I mean, in our organization, we have a set of values. We believe certain things. We believe certain things are the things we should teach. So there's always kind of a marriage between what you know you should do, like what is right to do, and reacting to the environment, because we don't live in a vacuum. I mean, we live in a world, we react, we work with the Secretary of Education, we work with the Secretary of the Environment, we work with corporate sponsors, we work with different publics. So we have to take all those things into account without sacrificing our core values that we have developed as an institution over the years. So I don't know if I'm answering the question, but it's kind of you're always weaving your way through and finding the best route.
I think on that, and just to link this into another question which has come in, to me that speaks of a need for a kind of political literacy, being able to read the context in your situation, and being able to advocate for a particular way through the maze or the smoke screens or the changing landscape. It's often unstable, and we don't really know where the country's going to be in 5 years, but we do want to keep a commitment like to Polisi Plus 40 over time, decade after decade, to strengthen people's attention to some of the environmental issues that people face, but also how we can respond to those within the education sector. One of the things which that also suggests to me is that kind of there isn't an option not to be civically engaged or politically engaged in something like the GEEP. There is that kind of, it's assumed that you're not just going to do this quietly in your own room with no one else knowing about this. It's going to be, you're going to have to engage with the politics of the field in your particular context, and that will lead to some difficult conversations. It might mean that you're shut out of certain particular areas for a while, depending on the dominant power within the country. All right, you want
No, I was just thinking that, of course, there's the what you might call the hidden curriculum of unsustainability, and by not becoming active, you are part of that hidden curriculum that kind of pushes us in a particular direction that we may not want to go. And we hear a lot about being entrepreneurial and adapting to change, which is probably all necessary. But if we focus too much on that adaptation to the inevitable change, and we forget to think about the structures that push us in a particular direction, then we can develop agency and empowerment, which is important. But we also need to develop what I might call disruptive capacity building, which sounds really maybe political, but that's not. I mean, that going against the grain, that asking critical questions, and indeed, we talk about Gandhi, we talk about Martin Luther King, Mandela, some of the world's inspirational forces. They all have had to work against certain movements and against the established grain, which requires a critical thinking, understanding political forces, what's working with me, what's working against me, how can we bring about change in a way that is what I would call transformative. So not just optimizing the systems that we have, but trying to rethink them using thinking about values, assumptions, principles that might lead us in another direction.
Arjen, I think on that, it's clearly inspiring to engage in these kinds of conversations, and there are all sorts of complications and permutations that we need to be aware of. Fortunately, we have things like the EE Pro platform where we can continue to have some of these discussions beyond the course of this webinar. Just as a shout out to one of the groups there, the EE Advocacy Group, often has to engage with these kinds of questions, and again, how we build capacity to adapt, to respond, to stay true to what's important. All of those kinds of things can be debated there, and again at other events. Our time has run out. It's been wonderful and a real honour to listen and interact with you on these topics, and I hope that this is one of the first of many opportunities to continue these kinds of discussions, and encourage people to visit the call for action, to think about how they would respond to those particular items. And remembering it's a draft, how can we improve on this? What would work for more people? Different settings, different contexts for working in this area. So again, on behalf of the virtual conference for NAAEE, I'd like to thank you as members of the GEEP for giving up your time and sharing some of your thoughts on this. And again, we look forward to continuing the discussion, whether it's online or in other places. And can I just apologise to people who didn't get a chance to have their question answered? We had so many questions coming in. It's really difficult just to filter them through. But again, there might be another opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Alan, and to the panelists. You can understand we just met for 2 days with the GEEP, and why the conversations are so invigorating, thoughtful. Every single colleague here is amazingly thoughtful, kind, committed, and passionate, and this is what is actually going to change the world. And I think as educators, we actually bring the hope. We bring the tools, the thinking, the ideas that are going to help people move forward and take action. And so thank you all again for your work the last couple of days, because we had some really exciting and important discussions, and also for coming here. Really great to hear you. I could listen to you guys forever. As Alan said, please, please, please go to actnowforee.org and vote on your priorities. Let us know what you think. These are draft actions, and we wanted to put something out there. And I should just say that NAAEE has some core values, like we're really optimistic and we're really collaborative, and one of them is we're disruptive. We need to be more disruptive, I think, and, to get a lot done. And I'm looking forward to seeing kind of how everybody votes, and then we'll be in touch more in the future about what we're going to do as we analyze all this data that comes in and what we're going to do in the future. So what we want to know as you go on to Act Now for EE is, what do you think the top priorities are? Is there anything missing? Do you have other ideas for us? And just having a global conversation. The technology allows us to connect in ways we never have before. And I also encourage you to go to the GEEP.org and EE Pro, and many of our panelists talked about the case studies and the profiles and the discussion groups and the resources. There truly is a lot there for you to find out and use, and we hope that you make use of all of these resources. So thank you all. Thanks to the panelists, all the members of the GEEP, and everybody that's listening. And I hope you'll Zoom in at 4 o'clock today for highlights of the research symposium. And again, that's on Zoom. It's not live stream. Thank you all so much, and really glad you're participating in the first session of the virtual conference. Thank you all.